The competitive 40K network presents Art of War. Art of War. Strategy and tactics. Discussions with the best players on the planet. Now your host, Nick Nanavati.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Art of War 40K podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nanavati, and this week we are joined by a very special guest, the winner of Nottingham Super Major all the way over in the United Kingdom, Will Whitaker. Will, how are you doing?
Hi, Nick. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on the show. I'm super excited to chat with you because not only did you win the Super Major, but you won it with Demons, my favorite faction of all factions. And, you know, you ran the Slaanesh flavor, which is quite spicy. It's definitely a detachment. I think a lot of players kind of see the power, but they don't know how to put all the pieces together. So it's really exciting to see that you've actually been able to not only do really well with it, but win a 500 plus person tournament.
Yeah, I think that at the event, I was probably the most surprised by my own result. For sure.
Oh, isn't that the best? Such a pleasant surprise. So that's what we're going to talk about today, folks. We're going to get to know Will. We're going to figure out how exactly he came out of the woodworks to win the Super Major with Slaanesh Demons, what his playstyle is like, how he approaches Warhammer, and of course his army. You know, what is this menace on the table that you need to be aware of doing? How does it operate, and how do you play against it? We're going to go over its secondary play, its primary play, its stratagems, all that good stuff. And then in part two, of course, that is for our patrons, our subscribers, our lovely fans and supporters. That's where we're going to talk about the good stuff. We're going to go through all of Will's games, all 6 rounds of the Nottingham Super Major, talk about his wins, and then his other wins, and then his more of his wins, because he only won this tournament, and really get into the details of how the Slaanesh army operates. You can get access to this show for $5 a month on patreon.com/AOW40K. We've been doing the show for 6 years. It means the world to me, and your support helps us do it. So thank you so much. Will, are you ready?
I am ready, yeah.
I'm so excited. Okay, I don't know much about you. This is one of our first conversations, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well.
Tell me a bit about yourself. How'd you get into Warhammer?
Well, I mean, you know, this is the same answer that many people give, which is that, yeah, I played it as a child. My brother really got me into it. Older brother, he liked the rules and stuff. So, yeah, finally, you know, I wanted to hang out with him, so I played Warhammer. And then eventually started to like it, I suppose. And then, stopped playing for a few years while I was a teenager into my early 20s. And then it was actually the Bloodthirster model. I was at work one day and I went on the Games Workshop website and that new Bloodthirster had come out. It's not new anymore, of course. But and I just was like, wow, look at that. The demons look so good nowadays. Look what they're doing with Warhammer. It's all plastic. It just looks great. So I got that and I got back into, painted that up and started playing again.
Dude, a man after my own heart. Bloodthirster got you back into Warhammer? You've got good taste. Okay, so now that we kind of got out of that, how did you make the transition from this Bloodthirster looks really cool to winning Super Majors? Obviously, that's quite the gap in terms of skill and the mountain to climb. So how did you get good at Warhammer? How did you start playing it?
Well, I think that for me, it was a very gradual thing. So that must have been 8th edition when I started playing again, I guess right at the end of 7th and into 8th. I was writing a list and I had an Inquisitor who could take 2 demon weapons and it didn't give any buff except that you got to roll twice on this like random buff that the Inquisitor got. So, you know, really bad, but kind of cool. And I wanted to build a model that represented that. So that was where I was there at the beginning of 8th. And then we started going to tournaments. My brothers and I, we started going to tournaments at some point in 8th there, I guess about halfway through. And then, by the time COVID happened and after COVID, we were just, hitting tournaments as often as we could, really.
Really? So it was kind of just like getting into tournaments in 8th edition. And then once the world kind of opened up after COVID, you just hit the ball running. Were you like successful at tournaments in the beginning, or were you like going 1-5, 1-4 type of?
I was always fine because I think that, you know, to go 3-2 or, you know, get a bit of positive win rate, if you're playing a strong army, definitely back then, I think that really that could just carry you through as long as you knew sort of the rules of the game.
Right. Like back in 9th edition, early 9th, and like towards the end of 8th, like the gamer knowledge was so less. So like you could just show up and have a really strong army, and that would get you most of your games. And like knowing how to play Warhammer wasn't commonplace at a tournament. Like it was a different time.
I think that's right. I think that over since then to now, the general skill has improved quite a lot. So so I think now if I started, probably I would be, dropping 4 games in a tournament if I was back then. But so I don't think, basically, to anyone who's at that level, there's no shame in that, just because everyone that you're playing against has just probably played much more than you. So it's just like everyone now seems to hobby hard. So
absolutely. So you were doing okay back then. What was the transition, that got you from going 3-2 locally or at like the tournament to really successfully dominating a super major? Like going 6-0 and then today's field is much harder than going 3-2 in 4 years ago field. That requires a lot of skill improvement as a Warhammer player. So what do you think helped you elevate your game so much?
Well, I really just think it was, I was dedicated to improving in, not so much that I played an awful lot, but at tournaments, I would think about it a lot, and I have a real, an enjoyment of winning, let's say. So, I am competitive. So if I do lose, that will eat at me, for the rest of the week. I'll be going over exactly why I lost that game. And then next tournament, maybe I don't lose to that same situation, but I lose to something else. So there's this slow progression of growth over maybe a 3-year period. And in that time, I was just regularly going 4-1 really for about a year at least, maybe even 18 months of just pretty standardly 4-1. Sometimes I go back to 3-2, but I just never could break that 5th game. And then I think just gradually. It was actually I didn't actually go 5-0 until last year in Leicester, which is the first event that I won. So it was the first time I went 5-0, and also it was the first time I went 6-0 and 7-0. So
wow. That's pretty awesome. I mean, just that is the embodiment of what ROR is, right? Like just kind of growth over time and, learning from your losses, improving with your wins, and just analyzing your games, getting better with it. So you started out with Demons. Have you been playing Demons the entire time?
I did. No, I haven't. I did start. I did. Not sure I mentioned that. I did play Demons back then. That's right, the Bloodthirster. Yeah, and actually, the first events I went to, it was with Slaanesh Demons, and I was actually the first real success I started having was when Emperor's Children. It was an Emperor's Children Demon soup list, and that had that strap to basically automatically charge out of Deep Strike, Honor the Prince. So you could, basically right. A miracle dice that you used after you rolled. So it was beautiful. It was like a 98% success rate on making that 9-inch charge. So that was I played Slaanesh back then, and I've always really liked that faction. But
very nice. That's cool.
I've definitely always preferred Chaos. So I had my first wins there last year in Leicester. That was with CSM. But it was with Triple Accursed. So, in some ways, I think that doesn't really count as a win because
hey, it's still a win. Anybody can take Triple Accursed. You have still to play it. That's really awesome. I'm glad to see you're sticking to your Chaos roots. I mean, I can appreciate some janky 9-inch charges with Chaos. That's spectacular. So you floated around editions, 8th to 9th, now 10th, different armies, allied Chaos Space Marines, main Chaos Space Marines, Slaanesh Demons, and of course, Accursed Cultist plays differently. And now you're winning with Fiends and Keepers. We'll get to that. But what would you describe your personal play style as? Are you more aggressive or defensive, cagey? How do you approach Warhammer?
I think that I'm quite reactive in general. That's I feel safer when I'm in control of the game, when I don't take these chances. But especially more recently, I think in 10th edition, I don't think that playstyle is quite as rewarded as it once was. So now I think that you really have, if you get given an opportunity, you have to seize that opportunity. So while I am, if my opponent doesn't really want to fight and I don't really want to fight and I think that's going to result in me winning, then fine, I'll play that passive game. But if my opponent gives me that in, I will take it. You do have to take those very aggressive moves when you need to nowadays.
Yeah, and I think knowing when and how to take that aggressive move is a really important step. And like you said, being reactive is a really nice way to play Warhammer, but you have to sometimes take the ball into your court and be proactive as well. So I think being able to balance that is really impressive. You're playing a pretty much all melee army right now in the form of Slaanesh Demons. How does that translate to a reactive style?
Well, I think actually Slaanesh Demons is probably it is quite a proactive army. So this one maybe isn't the real epitome of the way that I actually like to play. It does require you to stage and then just attack your opponent. But before this, I was playing Sisters with Penitent Host Sisters with Castigators supporting a bunch of melee pressure, and that's kind of that really does lean into that sort of reactive control of the board style thing, but still very capable of going and attacking your opponent's army with melee, which is really, really what I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. I love to hear that. Did you find that the natural cadence of Slaanesh being that aggressive melee army was counterintuitive to your natural tendency to play the game more reactively, or did you kind of fit into it seamlessly?
Well, I actually found it did actually flow really naturally that weekend. And I'll be honest, I hadn't actually played the army before that weekend. So
you did this with 0 reps? You won Nottingham with 0 reps?
Well, I had 7 reps by the end, but yeah.
What do you mean you had 7 reps by the end? What are you telling me right now? That's amazing. Dude, this is getting too easy out there. What are you saying?
Well, I think that might be the secret.
Let me ask you this. Are Slaanesh Demons broken?
I think that they might be.
My God. Okay, I played against them at LVO with my Genestealer call, and I played Demons. I didn't play Slaanesh Demons because I didn't think they were consistent enough. Sometimes you just have to roll the 4s and you get shot and you die. That was my thought. And then I played against Slaanesh Demons at LVO, and I manhandled it. I got an 18-2. It was like a complete massacre. Not because of a savage skill disparity between me and my opponent. He was quite a competent Warhammer player. He's won majors, but dude, how do you do it? That's what we're here to find out, I guess. Okay, Will, you've got me hooked right now because I'm a demon player. Tell me what your Slaanesh demon list is.
Yes, I will break through it from top to bottom. So it's obviously Legion of Excess. It's 2 keepers. One has the Slaanesh Legion of Excess has these 2 enhancements that are very strong. They're both 30 points. They're both worded very similar. They don't work on monsters. They're an aura that just works on everyone else. And they are +1 to hit or +1 to wound. And I went for the +1 to wound one, and I didn't take the +1 to hit. So 2 keepers, one with the enhancement False Majesty, which is this aura +1 to wound. And then Syll'Esske, who is always, she's good in every demon list. So she's just even better in this one. The Masque, which is the key to the list. We'll get back to that. And then a Tormentbringer on Exalted Seeker Chariot. So that's just a Slaanesh Herald on Chariot. Transweaver, that's another Slaanesh Herald, this one on foot. That will then join the 10 Daemonettes that I took next. 10 Plaguebearers, which are the only non-Slaanesh things in the list, but are crucial, I think. And then 15 Fiends, 6/6/3, and 15 Seekers, 10/5. And that's the whole list.
All right. On the offset, it looks like most of the Slaanesh demon lists, right? It's there's only so many data sheets you have access to as a Slaanesh demon army. So you have fiends, you have keepers, you got some seekers and demonettes. Some things I noticed is you're not really doing the soul grinder contorted epitome combo, and you have a little bit more heralds than I'm used to, like a Transweaver, a Tormentbringer, and Syll'Esske is a little bit less common. But from your perspective, why did you land on this array of data sheets, and how do you envision it working? What's the strategy?
Yeah, so the couple of decision points, I guess, where so I added 15 fiends to the list, and a few of the other things like 2 keepers and the Plaguebearers and the Masque and Syll'Esske, and I thought that basically that was kind of a no-brainer. They're all very strong pieces. So then the choices, the flex from there, I've always wanted a fights first unit. I see other people, I have to play around people having this fights first unit, and it just causes you such a headache that as soon as I have access to one in my list, I jumped on it. And the added bonus of having it on the Daemonettes is that Daemonettes are OC2 and they're on really tiny bases. So that's really good on UKTC, which is obviously what I played on, because the objectives are held by just these slivers of just a sliver of the objective is behind the wall, so you can only fit a couple of bases on there. But if it's 4 Daemonette bases, then that's still 8 OC. So your opponent has to put something real there. You can't really flip 8 OC that easily without coming and attacking my fight's first unit. So I quite like that as a thing. And so that really the choice there was between the Transweaver for this nice fight first unit, or the Epitome, which turns the Daemonettes into this totally other piece, which allows for this one stratagem that you can sometimes use to be useful. So I can touch on that now, which I'm sure people have heard of it. It's this Thieves of Pain is the name of the stratagem, and you can target any of your units that isn't a monster. So in this list, that's anything but Syll'Esske and the Two Keepers, and it's at any phase, at any point, as soon as wounds are allocated, and then you pick another unit, and the wounds go instead of the primary target to the target that you chose, and they go as mortal wounds, the same damage. So if you get shot by a las cannon, they roll a 6 on the damage, 7 mortal wounds get passed over to the other unit. And because I think las cannon's a d6+1, I might have just made that up. But anyway, the same damage is passed over, and if you have the contorted Epitome in there, that gives the unit a 4+ feel no pain against mortal wounds. So it makes the 18 wounds that you have in that Daemonette unit effectively 36 wounds to deal with 1 activation. Yeah. So it's like this battery to steal pain, whatever, steal damage from where your opponent wants to put it into something else.
Yeah. So you've foregone that combo, which I also don't run it in my Slaanesh Demons, but I know a lot of players think it's like one of the strongest things Slaanesh Demons have. Why don't you like it?
Yeah, I'm just not sure it really gels with what the list is trying to do. Because maybe if I was playing this sort of standoffish, control-y game where I'm just trying to like get primary, that way, be like, you're going to shoot my unit, well, it's going to pass off, you're going to kill this other unit, I'm going to end up standing on this point. Yeah, this kind of thing, like maybe it's useful. But really, it was just what didn't feel like a piece I needed when my plan is really just to go attack my opponent.
Right.
Because outside of that one stratagem, the piece feels useless. The Epitome Daemonette combo, it's not doing the things I want it to do. It's like the Daemonettes aren't really that great aggressively. They're great defensively with fights first, holding primary. But yeah, so you really have to get the leverage out of that stratagem, or what's the point? I've got one more point on there as well, and that's that that stratagem is still available to you.
Right, you can still just use it, right? You just don't get the combo.
Less efficient. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's also a great shout. I mean, like, it's not you have to take the Epitome to unlock the stratagem. It just makes it more efficient. And in a pinch, a strat is a great pocket tool. So that's the Daemonettes, and I mean that's the core to your list, right? The 15 Fiends, the Daemonettes that fight first now, Syll'Esske, the Masque, Double Keepers. Then you have some other choices like Tormentbringer and 15 Seekers. I'm even going to throw the Plaguebearers into the core since they hold the backfield. But what about the 15 Seekers and the Tormentbringer? Why'd you land on those?
Yeah, well, I'll touch on the Seekers first, which is that you just look at the buffs that the faction is bringing to the table, and suddenly these data sheets just become amazing. Like a Seeker, an individual Seeker is, it's 5 for 80 points. So each Seeker is less than 20 points, like 16 points, whatever. And it has 5 attacks. And if you're in your aura of +1 AP from a Keeper, and it could be the Keeper that's also giving you +1 to wound, and then full rerolls to hit and wound, you're talking about a 10-man Seeker unit has more output than 10 Warp Talons, and it's 160 points instead of 240 points. They're just very efficient.
Like, just for the offensive output of it. Do you find them difficult to maneuver because they're like weird cavalry bases?
No, because they're the small bases. So yeah, so you can cram them in, and there's a strat to go through walls, which is mostly what I used it on was this 10-man Seeker unit. So you could stage it and then it's got its 14-inch move right from a wall. It ends up being the fastest moving unit in the army alongside the keepers. But yeah, so that it just gets there, charges, re-rolls charges, +1 to charge because it's still got the the Daemonette upgrades sitting on its back, and yeah, and its ability is re-roll advances and charges, and it has a Scout's 9. Like you threaten this turn 1 threat range, and any army that has anything like cultists or anything that's not going to really kill that many seekers before they hit you, that you just threaten all of that, and really it even threatens light vehicles and stuff like this.
Right. Absolutely. I think it's incredibly powerful, like as a tool. What about the 5-man?
Yeah, and the 5-man is more of like a scoring piece, but again can punch up if it needs to. Like that's going to go kill 10 easily kill 10 infantry, like 10 cultists. Like any trash piece like that, it will very easily pick it up with 4 rolls to hit them.
Yeah, makes sense. I love that. So like that's your turn 1 pressure, and then what about the Tormentbringer?
Yeah, well, the Tormentbringer is just a great aura. That's what it's just incredible. I think it's 14 wounds and a 4 up invuln, so that's just good. You can pass off Thieves of Pain onto it and things like this, or from it, so it works either way. And it has 2 auras. One is an aura of sustained hits, which is fantastic. Just makes everything in the army, like it's all about, the army's just about these stacking butts. You've got the aura of +1 AP from a keeper, the aura of +1 to wound from the enhancement on the keeper, and then you've got an aura of sustained hits. And all that combined with the fact that most pieces in your army have dev wounds and full rerolls to hit and wound, and you've just got the most powerful melee units in the game for budget prices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other aura, well, it's not an aura, sorry. The other ability the Tormentbringer has is a fight on death 4-up. I pick one of my units and they fight on death on a 4-up. So yeah, I forgot that all weekend, but that is
just casually forgetting the rules and winning anyway. I love it.
If you are listening to this, it probably means you play Warhammer 40k. And if you're playing Warhammer, you know you need a lot of dice. Baron of Dice is where we get our dice from. They produce amazing different kinds of dice. We just recently got all kinds of different faction dice shipped to us, which we use on our stream games. But not only do they look really cool, but they're highly customizable. You can get different symbols, corners that are square, corners that are round, different shapes and sizes, different sided dice. It's all the rage. And they're customizable in color and design as well. They are so cool looking. Not only that, but they feel great to roll in your hands. I've never held dice that roll and feel this good. Not only that, but they are scientifically perfectly balanced. There are tons of case studies on people rolling thousands of dice and recording all the results that they get. And sometimes you might get a die that rolls just a few too many ones. We've all had to throw it out before. These dice are not like that. They are perfectly balanced to a T, thousands of rolls, perfect distribution. If you want to take your Warhammer game seriously and make sure the dice are not screwing you over, get some Baron of dice.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of different tools here, and I see how it all comes together. Its offense is crazy, its speed is really fast. Talk to me about some of the pieces that you consider in your core that I don't see in every single demon list. Like Keepers and Feeds don't really need an introduction, but Syll'Esske and the Masque, why are these so integral into your army design?
Okay, yes. We'll leave the best to last, so we'll start with Syll'Esske. And you just have to play against Eldar once or twice.
She runs the show into them.
Just how annoying Fugan is in the Eldar list. And he just runs around and they all talk Wayleaf or whatever. There's just these small pieces that set the tempo of the game when they go out early and they're hard to reach. Or you just throw them on an objective and be like, fine, kill me twice in a turn if you can. And this, it's saying, do something about it. You put Syll'Esske forward and you say, there you go, do something. That primary is mine. I've staged the rest of my army. You can't, you can try and attack me, but here's Syll'Esske at the same time. What are you going to do? You have to kill her twice, or you're going to put something on there to contest the objective or something, and she has a flamer. So it's just, you get this flow, get the game started that way. So I used to, in other demon lists, I used Syll'Esske to sort of harass the backfield. I'd wait till later and uppy downier, and then she'd be behind your opponent, and then she'd just like beat up whatever is on their home field. But now she just goes straight down the middle, and and she's hard to kill. T6, 9 wounds. She's happily gonna be seduced whenever she attacks, because probably she's not going to get killed. So she's going to have 4 rolls to hit and wound. Yeah, strong piece for 120 points. It's just
Definitely.
It's cheaper than a Way Leaper. If you put it that way, it's just, I don't know.
And do you usually ingress her, or is she like walking up the table?
No, I never. No, she's deployed right in the middle, ready to move onto that center objective turn 1.
Really?
And normally, turn 1, she can move right through the wall, advance onto that center objective, and just get the game started, really.
That's awesome. That's such a. I've always thought about using her that way. I've never like actually done it. I pretty much always ingress her just because she can be a really threatening piece like that. But in the aggressive tempo army that you're playing, I think it makes more sense to deploy her like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. So like I said in the other list, I used it that other way. But yeah, this list wants to play in such a way that you want your opponent to start fighting. You don't want this skirmishing tradey game. You want them to be like, right, here's my army, there's your army. Who's gonna win? It's Slaanesh, because they're just so powerful.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's that simple. Okay, so then the Masque, best to last. Okay, the Masque is
the Masque is the best. That's really what you're selling me on right now. Okay,
it's
I gotta hear this.
The total keystone of the entire army, and. So, I mean, she's 85 points for a lone op with 4 wounds and a 4-up invuln, with advance and charge and fights first. So that's the bits. That's like fine, nothing special, but sometimes useful to have. And she moves 9, which is not bad. So you can get her around the board quite easily. And then her amazing part is that she has an ability in the fight phase. You pick an enemy unit, and it gets both. You don't have to choose. It gets both. Your Slaanesh units are +1 to wound that unit, and that unit is -1 to wound everything. So it's just
super good in melee matchups here.
It's like someone has anything that's strength, below strength 10, and it's wounding keepers on 6s.
It can absolutely like flip the profiles of damage into like a keeper or something. But my problem with her is that she's like 4 wounds, 5 invul T3. She's so easy to kill. And like sure, she's a lone op, but she's trying to operate within 6 inches of your opponent. So how are you actually getting like use out of her?
Well, normally 6 inches is still behind a wall, if it's the center objective. Quite often, and you're 6 inches just behind the front of your model. So you're still, if the keeper is still only shooting this turn, then the Masque is still 6 inches back from there. So for lone op range, it's hard to interact with her. But once the fight started, sure, people like to throw a grenade at her, or they like to dedicate, some small thing that might kill her, and you've got a couple of ways to stop that, because you can do Thief of Pain for one. This was probably the only way. Over the weekend, this is the only time I used Thief of Pain, was when someone shot my Masque, and they only had the 1 unit shooting her, or someone grenaded my Masque, because you can Thief of Pain the grenade. And you just say, okay, so all that damage, instead of going on the Masque, goes on to my Tormentbringer on Exalted Seeker Chariot, whatever. So it's like, great, you did 4 wounds, 5 wounds to the other Herald that has 9 left, and the Masque is still standing, and people can't dedicate that much firepower to the Masque when all this other very powerful Slaanesh data sheets are looking right at them. So yeah, I found her
interesting. And you found her specifically good into like all the matchups, not just melee mirrors, but like shooting matchups too?
Yeah, I think that there's sometimes, most people have some sort of counterpunch. So if it's Marnie's Calgar, let's say, with strength 6, you're like, okay, you're wounding me on 6s, even with 4 rerolls. Please have fun. But then also there's other things, like you put your Seekers into 5 Marines, let's say. I'm not sure this happened, but this was, the kind of thing that I think about. You put 5 Seekers into 5 Marines. They normally wound you on 4s, but now they'll be wounding you on 5s. And, they killed 1 Seeker. That's not enough. That Seeker unit is now going to, even if it's just the 5-man, that's going to kill a lot of your Marines, especially the Aura still.
Right.
Because then also
interesting.
You get +1 to wound. Yeah.
So no, I got you. It's just like threat diversification thing, right? Like they can't kill Seekers and the Masque and the Daemonettes, and like all the bolts want to go in all those places. So, especially she's like inconvenient to shoot at if you use her properly. So it's not the easiest thing in the world. In terms of like the overall strategy, it's kind of become clear that you just like, here's my army, there's your army, you have one turn to shoot me, and then I'm charging you all over the place. But the execution of that, I'm sure, is a lot more granular. We're going to go over into your game specifically in part 2, but how would you define like the staging and charging portion of the game? Like what is the things you're looking for in turn 1, turn 2 deployment, that type of stuff?
Yes, I would, so normally what I was looking to do is move my Daemonettes with the innate defense of fight first onto my natural expansion objective. So that already sets up a hard position for my opponent to attack my primary. Then at the same time, Syll'Esske has probably wandered into the middle as another piece that's hard to deal with. And so that's 2 places where if nothing happens, I'm getting primary. And then all the fiends just move up, from the deployment zone to the staging area. It's normally only about 4 to 8 inches. So they don't need to use all their move. And so one fiend unit moves up and the keeper moves up with them. If it can somewhere, you also have to, if your opponent doesn't have enough guns to kill a keeper, then the keeper just goes out. It just runs 14 inches forward, maybe advances, and just like, okay, well, here's another problem that you're going to have to deal with. But usually, stagey caging while securing that foothold on the natural expansion objective. Maybe that's supported by the 3-man fiend. Maybe a 6-man is tucked away in that ruin as well. So ready to charge their natural expansion and already a foothold in the middle, ready to respond to whatever they send to kill Syll'Esske. So and probably the Masque in range that if they charge Syll'Esske, they're going to get -1 to wound. And maybe fiends, so they'll get a -1 to hit aura as well.
Yeah, Syll'Esske, of course, is not a lone op. So are you concerned with your opponent like shooting her from far away out of charge range and then charging some trash unit into Syll'Esske?
Yeah. Well, you kill her once, and then the trash unit. Well, I mean, if you chart, there's probably fiends nearby to. It's
like heroic intervene. Well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to charge with. It's just a hard piece to interact with in that setting. You've got fiends ready to heroic. You've got the fact that she gets up, so you can't really just shoot her to death. She is only OC2, so the probably the appropriate response is just to put 2 OC on the point and not try not to interact with her. But that's normally, I'm only staging the 1 turn. This is only so that my charges aren't so far, and next year everything's just going to next turn everything's just going to go flying forward.
Is this like a UKTC thing? I'm not super familiar with their boards, but are you able to stage like pretty close to your opponent's side of the table and then charge from there, or is it are the charges difficult from your staging spots?
You can get to the middle. That's where you can get. You can't really, if your opponent is still staying in their deployment zone, it's hard to charge them. But there's nice staging points to get to their natural expansion objective, if that's what you want to call it. So where all the objectives are, you can interact with each other with melee armies, which is a nice, So you don't have to stand in the open for a turn before you make contact if they're on their objective. But that's
pretty big, honestly.
But the flip side of that is that they can do that one away from the wall thing. There's no caveat to get around that. So it's very easy for your opponent to dictate what it is that you're charging. So it is still really quite hard to interact with that.
So is there always going to be an element of like Jesus take the wheel with this army? Because even if you can line it up where you're staged, then you charge, and your opponent gets to use the 1 inch away from walls rule to basically mean you charge the end of a screen or something. So you're not connecting into the heavy stuff, and then you're standing like right in front of his army. And then they get to tee off on you, right? Like with all their big damage and all that stuff. And if you fail too many saves, like it's not good. And if you pass enough saves, it's very good. Is that the idea of the cadence?
It didn't really feel that way. Sometimes, yeah. I mean, keepers are hard to kill. So
for sure. Not to imply this is a bad plan. I'm just trying to really wrap my head around like the flow of it.
I'm also trying to put it into words, I think, because I wouldn't hate to put out a unit of fiends in the open just for it to die, and I don't think I really do that. But it is hard to the keepers are just so impossible to ignore because they do good damage. So you put out a keeper and maybe a unit of fiends after they've both killed something, even if the thing they've killed is something not that valuable, it's still just 2 less units for your opponent. And then sure, they shoot back and maybe they kill all the fiends first, probably kill all the fiends, and then maybe they don't have enough damage left to kill the keeper as well, because it requires real dedication to remove that piece.
Yeah, right. Do you ever find that there's certain armies like Astra Militarum, for example, or Space Marines even, where they have the hellacious damage just kind of pick up most of it?
Yeah, I was worried about Guard, to be honest. Nassim was there, and he's been playing this, that brutal parachuting. Yeah, parachuting guys. Yeah. So, I was scared of that one, but Innis got him in the semis, and I got Josh. So
there you go, one problem at a time.
Exactly. I think Orcs as well. Brian was there, and I think he just missed the top cut. But I haven't played that much of either. Well, basically that's the thing. It's like, let's say there's the 3-4 strongest armies in the game: Slaanesh, Orcs, and Guard. And I think maybe Orcs and Guard might have a good game into Slaanesh. So maybe that causes a problem, but that's untested from my end. Okay, so that I don't know if that's true or not. But
sure, no, I mean that's very synonymous with what I've been finding. Like if we're going to compare Slaanesh to the best armies in the game when it comes to damage, like that's where I think it falls a little short. But I also haven't tried it much. I'm very curious. Just a tangent, us real quick. Like you did not mention Space Marines in your like little triad of best armies in the game. Where are they in your mind?
Yeah, I think they're one of the top 4. I said 4, and then I only said 3 armies. So they
gotcha.
Were...
Yeah, no problem. I was like, wait, are we on different pages about this? And I would be super curious, but that makes sense. Okay, so I get that you're trying to make the game a turn 2, I charge your army situation. Are you reserving anything, or is this like all boots on the ground, everybody blitz like every time?
No, it's normally, and honestly, it really wasn't a second turn charge army. It sounds that way, but it's one of those things. It's like it's playing with pressure, isn't it? That's really what the essence of it is. Is you move up into your staging points, and then you measure your threat ranges, and you say, this is where I could go, and either your opponent tries to play the game with you and stand in that space, or they don't, and then you can kind of win because you've got the board. You've got Syll'Esske in the middle. Right. You've put them in a situation where they really have to come play with you. Yeah, so it's not really put everything here and then just push it all forward. It's more like
control the mission flow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what have they put forward? Because okay, fine. So here's a key point that I don't think I've mentioned yet, which is that. And people seem not to believe it every time I say it, but the more I play it, the more it's true. It's that anything you charge with this army, anything at all that I charged all weekend, died. Everything died. Like it is too strong. So you have to realize that. So you've got 3 fiends, and they've put forward 5 Marines or maybe even 10 Marines. Just like, fine, I'll charge those Marines with my 3 fiends. Oh,
I've had 3 fiends not kill a Taurox before. We have different fiends.
Well, maybe you're in the. You have to make sure your auras are there. You have to make sure the Masque is buffing it. It's like you got to play with the auras. And the great thing about Fiend is that they're massive. So one Fiend can base, or 2 Fiends base, and then the other Fiend. The base is that Fiend, and it's like pushing 6 inches back from where the enemy unit is.
I'm really glad you brought up the size of the Fiends. I totally hear you in regards to how it makes the ore range awesome, but isn't it a double-edged sword where your army is enormous, so hiding it is super hard?
Yes, it does. Those 6-man Fiend units can be tough to hide. So normally the way it worked was one would stage, and then the other one would be quite far back, and then that one would launch off like a missile, and the next one would move into that same spot, because you couldn't possibly hide them all in that one ruin.
So like a bit of a staggered approach instead of like all threat all the time.
Exactly, yeah. But there's half the army is enough threat if your opponent puts stuff out, or just that front half of the army, and really it's everything but 1 unit of fiends, really. And I didn't mention this also. My second keeper is almost always an ingress threat.
Oh wow.
Well.
Okay, so you deploy the +1 to Wound Keeper,
Exactly,
and then you
yeah.
regress the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
fascinating. I really like this style of army. So, how would you say your secondary play is? You have very minimal like screening trash units. Like how are you able to do actions and stand places?
Yeah, it's really, really bad. That's what the second
It's really bad.
really bad. You need to, have that one unit of Seekers that sometimes I deploy off the board so it could deep strike on and, get containment or whatever. But often it's rely on, like, the Masque will stand behind a wall and do the 2 points for that middle one, whatever it's called, data,
Established locus, yeah.
exactly, old homers, whatever, yeah. And cleanse, maybe the fights first Daemonette unit cleanses because it just kind of wants to stay there anyway. Maybe it can do one containment, that same unit, if it can stay on the point and still be 9th on the board edge. I think that's a possibility in some games. But often I draw containment and be like, dead card. And
that's crazy to me.
That's
exactly. Like a 6-point card. I love that card. Oh
I love it as well. I absolutely love it. In Sisters, it was fantastic. It was one of the favorite cards. But now it depends which turn you get it. But there's some turns where you just because your pieces are auras rather than pick targets. Like the Tormentbringer has to be quite close to the middle. The Masque they have to be right there in the fighting. So they can't and obviously you've lost your Uppy Downy. Which Demons used to be so good at secondaries, and now, So I mean, I thought about putting in. There's the Cinch guy, the Cinch Herald on Chariot, because he
goes up and down,
Uppy Downy, and maybe that helps with the secondaries. But really, it came back to this. There's one advice that I kind of wrote out for this list, which is just don't be cute. You're not here to win that close game. You're here to dominate primary and probably dominate material on the board.
Does this make you nervous, just like putting yourself out there and like charging like that?
No. I think that I was in a really good mental space that weekend. I think sometimes you just rock up to events and it just seems to click.
Yeah, I get that.
And so I didn't really mind if I won or not. This was an army that I felt like in my head I was just learning. I was as the weekend went on, I played another. It's like, well, okay, well, that
you're 7-0 at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And basically, just across the weekend, I was like, I just wonder where the limits of this army are. That's what I kept thinking to myself. It's like, oh, I wonder what the limit is. And it just never came. So
that's amazing, dude. Oh my god. Okay, well, I'm so curious to see how your actual games played out, because once we get into the minutia of positioning and combats and shooting and line of sights, it really the theory comes to test. So that's going to be part 2 of our conversation. But I have one more question before we get there. If you had a piece of advice for an aspiring Warhammer player, what would it be?
Okay. I thought about one sort of step forward on my understanding of how to play this game was the breakdown of instead of thinking about your army as this like bunch of individual units, like what are you going to do with this unit this turn and what's that unit going to do? It's instead think of it as like this whole, like you only have one move, let's say, and it's what's the whole going to do instead of trying to split it up into individual units. And I think that I think it's easy to say but hard to do, because obviously when you're there thinking about it, it's easy to backseat drive Warhammer basically. Right. But just try and think about, instead of thinking about what one thing's doing, thinking about what your whole army is going to do.
Yeah, like not my unit moves forward to do this job. My army is going to move forward, and this unit is part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, like that's just the one hand that's reaching out to do that action. Meanwhile, the rest of this stuff is moving up to support it. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate talking to you and getting your insights on Demons. You've kind of inspired me to give them a try again.
Well, yeah, I think that everyone should give them a try. And if you're a demon player, I think you will be very pleasantly surprised as soon as you put them on the table.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll catch you in part 2, listeners. So definitely subscribe if you haven't, patreon.com/AOW40K. Will and I are going to go through all of his games from the Nottingham Super Major event. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you later.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War Down Under and Art of War Unbroken on the competitive 40K network. theartofwar40k.com.